Hi, everybody. Happy Monday. Really excited to do this Data is Love session with Toussaint Bailey, who we've only met a couple of times, but the work that you're doing is so phenomenal. And I know I'm not the only one that has a crush on your work and your company. And maybe I might have gotten some DMs in my Instagram today. So can we just start with like, hearing a little bit about your background and what led you to creating Uplifting Capital?
Yeah, so I use the phrase lived experience all the time, right? And so, first of all, so Uplifting Capital is an impact platform, and I use that term broadly. We do impact investing as our business, but we aim to be impact ecosystem builders across investment, philanthropy, advocacy, volunteering, anybody who we can bring together to act upon, the world's most pressing problems. And I have been, uh, acted upon by a lot of those issues, right? So DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is the other side of a lack of diversity or a lack of access, exclusion, right, and inequity. I've faced those. I've faced education issues coming from high school. So all the things that we try to solve. The worst sort of recipients of the climate crisis are in communities like the one I grew up in. And so the fire in my belly to approach these issues comes from that place of lived experience. And I think a lot of that came to a head for me, like a lot of folks in 2020, when life was a little bit quieter than normal, and many of us were more introspective. And some of the things that we were quietly bothered about, probably for years and years and years, we had the ability to hear, and we got a little bit louder in our sort of response to those things. And I'm among that crowd. I was working at a private wealth firm, a good sized private wealth firm, trying to bring fulfillment and all sorts of other things to people of means. And I realized my own fulfillment was inextricably linked to my ability to create impact and access for others, and help people with means create impact with those means. And so off I went to launch Uplifting Capital, met good partners, and built a good team. And we are just trying to help people access the impact that's most important to them, and engage with that impact in a way that's meaningful, not only to their circumstances, but also brings meaning back to the impactor.
Well, you're taking me back to a moment in my career where I was also doing work in impact investing. We talked about that when we first met. But as I'm hearing you talk about, like, I'm just going to paraphrase and say there is a dissonance when you're working with extremely wealthy people and something like a global pandemic is raging, and their life and their circumstances is shifting in very different ways than the rest of the population, right? Yeah. So it's amazing. I feel like the pandemic has birthed so many incredible entrepreneurs, and it's created space to have conversations that I know, even though I'm not a Black person in America, like 5 years ago, even the conversations that we've had on Data is Love, I think I would be shadow banned from every social platform on the planet for talking about that out loud. And so, yeah, I guess gratitude for that moment of pause. Toussaint, you talk about something called the emotional impact alpha. You made up this term. It's very cool. It's very sexy. What does it mean? And like, why is it important to, I think, the future of impact investing as a sector?
Oh, how cool is it to be in a circle and in a conversation where emotional impact alpha is sexy, not completely nerdy. So yeah, I'll talk. Emotional impact alpha is borrowing from this term impact alpha, and the idea of impact alpha is the intersection between impact. So this is an impact investing term. The intersection between the impact that you want that investment to have from a positive change standpoint, and the impact that you want to have on financial returns. So it's where those two things intersect, and it's those two things working in synergy together. So the very thing that creates this good impact is the very thing that generates the financial return for an impact investment. The idea of emotional impact alpha is having the very thing that generates an uplift for some person or some aspect of the planet is the same thing that generates fulfillment for the person who's engaging in the work of uplifting or engaging in the investment of uplifting. And I think it's the reason that that alignment, that outlet for purpose is a lot of the reason why we see people moving toward impact investing or philanthropy or volunteering. But to articulate that and to have those things line up, not only kind of paying attention to what makes people feel good, but also making sure that that's additive. Sometimes people look for fulfillment from their impact in a way that is sort of detracts from the real need, right? People show up and you hear about greenwashing, or you hear about sort of posturing and all sorts of things to feel good about what we think we're doing, but aren't actually creating change. And on the flip side, some people are fighting and wrestling and struggling to create change. And sometimes we get so entrenched in the physical struggle or in the outward struggle that it becomes this internal struggle, and we think that has to be part and parcel to the work. But working in community, finding purpose in our work, finding meaningful change and seeing meaningful change, that doesn't have to be something that depletes us. And so coming to this place where we can sustainably do the work, and do the work in a way that actually keeps us able to and inspired to continue to do the work is the whole idea of this emotional impact alpha.
I love it. And not only because I'm a nerd, which like certifiably, I mean, literally, I do a weekly show called Data is Love. It's like major nerd vibes over here. There are two things that I picked up on, as you're talking about emotional impact alpha. One is this idea of fulfillment. The person doing the uplifting should feel fulfilled. And I think not, I guess I'm reading into it, like not in like the hokey philanthropy way where somebody wants like a wing of a hospital named after them and repainted in their favorite color, like true story of like these are real things that happen, right?
I'm laughing because I'm cringing on the inside.
Because there are people that are like, I'd like to give $250,000 and walls in this wing should be lavender, and you're like, why? Can I use that for something that's like real, or like is there a therapeutic value to your favorite color? And the other thing that I heard you say is that it doesn't have to be a struggle. And I think that when we think about social impact work or social good efforts, there is this idea of struggle. And so yeah, I mean, what does that look like to
So what
not
we're doing with
be?
our hands may be struggle,
Yeah,
right? What we're
yeah,
actually out there doing, maybe like if you think about like the most difficult forms of exercise and how you feel as you're going through those or as you come out of those, there's no lack of effort and struggle in actually accomplishing the task. It's the
yeah.
mindset and what we allow ourselves to do and think, and how much community we find as we go through this work, and how we preserve our mental health. And it's certainly not that hokey kind of paint a hospital my favorite color. And so the place where I start most of these conversations about finding fulfillment and impact is with grief and with regret. And I think those are like getting in touch with those and accessing those places and getting honest about those are, I think, necessary precursors to getting to a place where you actually go to hope, and then to go to action and then see meaningful work. And so for me, and this is again from lived experience, I was grieving deeply before I start. So I launched into my impact work properly when I was running the wealth management firm by leading these conversations across racial differences and helping people have some honest conversations in the workplace about race, something that I never would have done until George Floyd's murder busted me wide open. Right, I was the only, in most professional settings, the only Black man, only Black person in many of the professional settings. Like fewer of us, the higher I went. And it was just, something that I didn't come into work and talk about. I came into work and I had my Black experience outside of work, at home and in my life. And I came to work, did my job, and went home. Like the grief and the pain and the regret, like collective regret from those circumstances, having the quiet to reflect on those, and then just needing to, one of the authors of the 5 stages of grief, David Kessler, wrote this book about this 6th stage, finding meaning, where like the former 5th stage and final stage of grief that he had written about, of acceptance, just wasn't satisfying enough when he lost his 21-year-old son to an overdose. And so he wrote about the need to do something more. And he started to study all these people who found meaning and healed by healing others, or healed by engaging with their grief in a different way. And so I picked up that book because I was grieving, and I found my healing in healing others and helping others have these conversations. And so when I talk about fulfillment, there's nothing light and airy about it to start with. It's really about healing first. And then, you get to hope. And even that is not this kind of lofty form of hope where you hope that things change while you hide your head in the sand. It's a growth mindset kind of hope. It's the hope that the actions that you're taking to act upon a problem and to change a set of circumstances actually will have some effect on that outcome. And so like that kind of hope is necessary for somebody to actually start taking steps toward change, right? And so it's that form of hope, and it's that form of fulfillment, and that level of kind of anchored feeling that I'm talking about when I think about emotional impact alpha and the fulfillment that comes from good trouble and doing good work.
I feel like I've just had the therapy session that I've needed all week just now with what you said. Yeah, but I mean, what you said about grief. I know that, I lost my brother 3 years ago, and I had a really similar experience of wanting to find something that like really resonated more than client work that pays the bills, or like doing shit for the sake of doing it. Yeah, and I think that it's probably true also for people that are wealthy, that are investors. They also have feelings, they have like trappings of comfort, but that's not devoid of feeling and all the things that they too are experiencing in the world. um, so I'm curious, like in starting Uplifting Capital, I'm sure you've had to go out and raise. And what has that looked like with this vision?
Mm. A lot of faith. And so I knew, I think that the numbers on raising as a first time, particularly diverse Black manager, are no secret anymore. I don't think it's the infinitesimal amount of capital that goes to first time managers of color. Also, the fact that those managers are overrepresented in the top quartile, in the outperforming managers, I don't think is much of a secret. And so I prepared us for the long haul. So we raised money to sustain the company while we raised money into our first fund. And so I think like it's been such an interesting process, because there's some element of privilege that I have coming from this private wealth space in terms of relationships and the conversations I have access to. But it's interesting to see how many people take meetings and are happy and super enthused about talking to a Black fund manager who's investing for impact in the private markets, and then the delta between that and the people who write checks. Right, like they're like meeting takers and check writers are two different universes, and that's fine. I that was part of the expectation, but I've now shifted. And so what we're doing now is we borrow from a shout out to the amazing Sue Twigo. And if you don't know her work, people should get to know her. She's been doing so much for so long to create access for Black professionals in the finance space, going back to the late 80s, and has this amazing organization, the Twigo Foundation. She happened to come and speak to, I was accepted to this BIPOC first time fund managers accelerator called VC Include, and have all these
Mhm.
amazing speakers, all this amazing training. Most of her work is in the endowment and pension space when it comes to consulting. And she talked about this dilemma that first time fund managers face where this big kind of limited partner, this big LP needs to write a check of a certain size. I need to write a check of at least $5 million or it just doesn't make sense for us to go through our process. And then they have this other constraint where they say, but we can't be more than 20% of your fund. So it's just too much risk for us if we're coming in as more than 20% of your fund. Love what you're doing. Absolutely believe in how you're investing and all that. We just can't do it. And so you have this standoff. And so she started to do this thing where she says, I know you believe in inclusion and I know you believe in this manager. You wait right there and hold that $5 million check. You do the same, and you collect 5 different organizations and you have them all come in at the same time as this sort of investor circle. And then they fund a manager, that manager benefits, they benefit. And so I have shifted our approach from this kind of scattershot, go talk to 1,000 investors about investing a small amount. And now I've started to go to a lot of the private wealth leaders that I know who do are inclusion minded and ask them to put words to action to their words and say, look, we know you have billions and billions of dollars across your firm. And we know you, like others, want to support me as a manager and the managers that we invest. We also invest in first time in emerging BIPOC managers, by the way. And so we know they want to support it. Here's your opportunity. Why don't 5 of you come in and put in $5 million checks for the first few years of our existence and fund what we're doing and fund this change to the ecosystem and this impact. And so actually, since shifting to that approach, things have been going a lot more smoothly. It's taken some boldness for me to shift to bigger asks, but it's been good. Those conversations have gone quite well, and so we're enthusiastic about where we're headed this year and in future years.
I wish I had $5 million to write the check, but I'm just going to say that if there's any LPs watching, that they should be talking with you. And what a fussy, interesting conundrum, right? $5 million is a lot of money for most people. And I think that when it comes to raising a fund, 5 million, like for somebody, they're like, well, that's not a big check.
That's
I
right.
need to spend at least right. And I think that this
Yeah,
is also for first time entrepreneurs that want to raise $500,000. They're also often stuck in this same conundrum, right? Where someone's like, it's not worth it for me unless you're going to take $1 million, but also, like,
that's
do you
what
want
that
the,
we've heard that. So we've heard. So this first fund is 25 million, and then we're going to go out next year raise 100 million and beyond that. And we've heard why so small from these big check writers. And so for first time entrepreneurs and first time fund managers with either a lack of access to how much money there is out there and how much gets raised, or imposter syndrome starts to creep in when you're kept out for so long. You start to believe that you don't belong in. Improperly believe and falsely believe that you don't belong in. So I would push against that negative belief for first time fund managers, first time entrepreneurs. It may take longer, but thinking bigger is where we belong. Being bigger and on bigger stages, commanding bigger checks is where we belong. And I think the more of us who step into that truth, the better off we'll be.
I'm here for this. I'm also an absolutely shameless person. I'll ask anybody to write a check, basically at any point, because yeah, I mean, it's kind of a pity that so little money is going to fund managers that are people of color and entrepreneurs that are people of color. It's like single digit percentages. And they consistently outperform their white only, right? Like really homogenous portfolios, like consistently outperform. And so I'm curious about the data side. Impact investing is, of course, not only concerned about the financial return, but also the good of the people, the planet, communities, right? Like there should be additional benefit other than just cash. And so, how are you thinking about that piece? As you're going to start writing checks yourself, what are the things that you're going to be looking for in your portfolio companies?
Yeah. So first of all, our first hire was a director of impact. Like there is, so we are for our market rate financial returns and all of that. But if the impact's not there, there's our reason for being's not there. And so what we think about from an impact standpoint is across 9 themes in 3 big buckets: people, planet, economy. And anything that uplifts in that people bucket: justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion, health and wellness, or education. Anything in that planet bucket that properly addresses climate change, natural resource conservation and regeneration, or sustainable food and agriculture systems. And then in that economy bucket: financial inclusion, affordable housing, and small business development. And so those are our themes that we think about impact in. And then across those themes, we'll invest in anything in the private markets that we think is measuring that impact, or that we can measure that impact in. So that's impact investments by name, or thematic investments that we can put an impact overlay on. And part of our contribution to the ecosystem is to help managers and entrepreneurs understand their own impact. And so helping them think through strategic intent and articulate their impact intent, helping them think through originating and structuring and active engagement, portfolio management, and then impact at exit. And so across those themes, we're measuring all of those kind of touch points of impact. And then all along the way, thinking of what our contribution is to any given fund or entrepreneur. So even if something's impactful, if we can't put more than just our money there, it doesn't make sense for us to go there. We'll allow somebody else's kind of money to impact that. And so we're targeting impactful investments at the top. So in terms of impact due diligence framework, and then we're applying screens, both impact screens, so DE&I screens, so diversity, equity, and inclusion at kind of that firm level or fund manager level, and then ESG screens. And so we're not an ESG fund, but we're thinking about how well our funds that we're investing in, or firms that we're investing in, are acting at the corporate level, not just kind of what their core mission is. And then we classify it, we map to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and then if things get through all of those screens, they go through our financial screens, and that's how we think through they get beat up in our investment committee, and we invest.
Those are a lot of screens.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that's a lot of, those are a lot of filters, and I think that they're pretty robust filters. I mean, I know there's quite a lot of criticism about the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and ESG, and just I think DEI in general is getting a beating right now. But but with all of those screens, um, what's like the addressable market? Like who are the entrepreneurs that are going to be able to, and the companies, the products that they're creating, they're going to be able to meet this bar? Not that they shouldn't, just so that we're clear.
Yeah,
Um,
no. That there is such incredible work going on out there from not only a sustainability standpoint, which I think has gotten a lot of shine. So the climate has gotten a lot of shine, and I think ESG and sustainable investing to some extent has become synonymous with climate. Part of the reason why I stepped into this space that is pretty crowded was because I thought more of people of color needed to be in this space to kind of put a microphone to the social problems and to the intersection of climate and social justice, right? Climate justice. So there's investable stuff in that climate space, and there's investable stuff in the social space. But my favorite intersection is seeing people of color and entrepreneurs of color who are bringing climate solutions forward and bringing other sustainable solutions forward. And so our very first investment before we even formed a fund was a company called Spark Charge, Black founder Joshua Aviv, and they're doing mobile EV charging, for instance. And so you can pull up on your mobile phone anywhere, whether there's a charging station or not in the cities where they operate. Pull up the app, call for a charge, and have this kind of mobile charger come and charge your phone. They're doing different products and working with AAA and some other organizations to do this kind of mobile charging. And so with the proliferation of electrical vehicles and the proliferation of kind of interest in those electric vehicles, like the infrastructure is lagging. And so thinking about those kinds of solutions and seeing this young man who created this solution in his dorm room at Syracuse, and is now seeing all sorts of support. Just came from speaking at the White House around not only climate change but also small business development. Like, that blows me away, and the opportunity to be a tiny piece of supporting that. And he came to us through a Black fund manager who we work with, Ed Jean-Louis at Tail Ventures. And so to see that ecosystem develop and to be able to be a part of that has just been it's lit my fire in a way that I haven't had probably for my whole professional career.
That's amazing. I am gonna be downloading this app because
currently is the
that's
name of the app. The company is Spark Charge.
I mean, look, it tells us what it does, right? It's like nails are pretty great. Like, I know this is a nail salon. Like, please don't make me do the thinking. But I mean, I'm just, like, you're talking about climate change, and I grew up in India, and even in the 90s and the late 80s, we had timed outages and water shortages. And I went and lived in India in my early 30s, and that was still happening. There would be like the drinking water would come in a tanker, and we're talking big city, really comfortable apartment. And it's very real, right? Like, it's already here. It's not like a thing in the future. Although living in the Pacific Northwest, like, we live in like nature central, but it's not a thing in the future, right? And it has impacts. But something like Spark Charge also have, like, that technology and that thinking has implications also for, I think, parts of the country that are not as well connected,
Yes.
right, or disaster relief, but then also in the global south, where there's literally like tens of millions of people that have never used electricity.
And the implications are also there, and the solution is also there for lower income EV ownership. So like right now,
Yeah.
electrical vehicle ownership is a privilege, and a lot of it has to do with needing a single family residence where you can access and control the ability to power your vehicle. And so a big place where they've won, and if you look at where their services are really used, it's places where there's heavy concentrations of multifamily housing. Because those folks don't have the ability to charge at home. And so if you think of everybody in apartments being shut out of the EV market because they don't have the ability to control charge, not only do we decelerate what we're doing positively on a climate change front, but we also are shutting folks out of what should be a very, very positive kind of, and is now becoming a culturally relevant change in terms of vehicle behavior. And so yeah, it's like thinking about it from a kind of an access to EV standpoint is also a reason that was compelling for us.
That I mean, we have an electric vehicle. I love it. It's right, and all of the things that 100%. Yeah, it is. It's okay. I have one last question for you. I mean, I have so many questions for you.
We'll keep talking. We won't make everybody.
But my sort of last question for you is, how will you know when you're successful?
So it's this whole idea of, I think, kind of this, I called it bilateral healing when I was doing that kind of racial healing project. And here it's this two-way uplifting. I think my energy tells me when I'm being uplifted, and that typically happens when I'm uplifting others. So the goal is to impact and uplift 1 billion people, whether that's kind of directly or indirectly. So that's the number that I put out there. I need something to shoot at, but really, like, I know it on a moment by moment basis, because the feeling that I have, this whole idea of emotional impact alpha, the feeling that I have when I'm actually contributing to the betterment of others and the betterment of the planet screams at me, versus this kind of just baseline a dissatisfaction. I call it the state of the quietly bothered. I was walking around in the state of being quietly bothered, where before I was ripped out of that state by grief, I wasn't even aware that I was just kind of I was weighed down. Like, you wake up slower, you feel less enthused about life. And so I'm awake inside. That's how I know I'm being successful moment by moment.
I'm awake inside, and the state of the quietly bothered. I feel like that's like a sticker that I need to create for all the people that I know that are. Whenever you start taking the smaller checks, right? Maybe like five figures.
We'll
Um,
take them.
I'll
Please don't
I'll
get me
be
wrong.
um I'll be there. I'll be there with my tiny skinny checkbook. Susan, thank you so much for spending
Oh,
your time with me. The work that you're doing is absolutely inspirational, and I hope that it becomes the gold standard for not just how impact investing happens, but hey, there's a whole world of VCs and PEs and MRIs and PRIs. Like everybody needs to be thinking and putting people through like all of the screens. I mean, that's been like one of my biggest takeaways is like, yeah, like the bar has to be up here.
yeah, there needs to be discipline in measuring and managing. No, I deeply appreciate you making the space for me. This is a joy. I will forever be in my heart being with you and someone who thinks emotional impact alpha is sexy. I'm in the right spot.
Um, Thank you. Have a great day. If folks want to get in touch, we've just put your website, and I'm hoping that folks will reach out to you over LinkedIn as well. You'll accept their invitations to keep chatting further. Thank you. Have a great day. And I'm so thrilled to be like able to follow your journey.
Thank you.